Brief Board of Education regular meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sebastian?
Here.
Mr. Elam?
Here.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Here.
Mrs. Donahue?
Here.
Mr. King?
Board of Education regular meeting and saying the pledge of allegiance. Mrs. Hageman. Mrs. Sebastian. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The United States of America. Thank you. Sorry about that. No problem. Did you miss that over here? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting, please? Thank you, Lyda. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. King. Discussion. Yeah, I would like to add, after the agenda minutes are approved and read, the public participation of agenda items only into our agenda. Okay, well, we have a motion, a second on the floor. We'll have to vote on that, and then you can make a motion for that. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to add a section after the agenda items are read, or excuse me, agenda meeting minutes are read, that allows the public participation for agenda items only in tonight's meeting. Have a second, please. Mr. England seconds. Is there any discussion? Yes. It is rude to not allow the community an opportunity to speak on any of the agenda items. We usually do it, and it's been a practice of the past few meetings that we have not allowed the public to speak on the agenda items. How are we as a board to make a good decision if we don't know everything that the community is thinking? There might be some good ideas. There might be some other things that we hadn't thought about, and it just makes sense to allow people to talk. We have the 5-minute rule. It can be applied, and this should not be an issue every time. And in the past, I might add that other people have asked for things to be added to the agenda without making a motion. So it's unusual that you did that tonight, but that's my discussion. Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. Any other discussion?
I do.
Yes.
Yeah. So I understand what you're saying, Ms. Donahue, and it really doesn't matter because the next meeting I will be sitting here. So, but what I would say is the agenda is posted ahead of time online for any of our constituents to review and have questions or concerns that could be brought forward to the board or to the superintendent or the treasurer to have their questions answered versus showing up here, doing a hijacking of the meeting to make some big pomp and stance event so that they feel that they get to blindside everyone. We could have potentially averted it and fixed it before we even came to the meeting. So it's better just to show up and make a big scene. So that's why I don't feel like it's appropriate.
Well, thank you for that. I did ask on Saturday when I noticed when I was going through the draft version, when the regular agenda hadn't been put out yet, the final agenda, I should say. I did ask on Saturday, and I sent an email to Lori, our president, Tina as our treasurer, and Mr. Crispin as our superintendent. And his recommendation was to come in and make a recommendation, which I did. And it could have been handled Saturday to allow the participation to go forward, but instead it was thrown to the meeting. And so here we are. And it's really unfair to say that people are going to hijack the meeting. We don't know that they don't have good intentions with their questions. You can't assume that of everybody. So that would be the only thing that I would say, but thank you for your comments. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. King and Mrs. Donahue. Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Donahue,
What are we voting on now?
to add the public participation.
I thought there was no second.
No, Mr. Elam second.
Oh, you seconded?
Yeah.
Sorry, okay. I
So,
didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
it's okay.
Sorry, I just thought we moved on.
So yes from you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. King,
No.
Mrs. Sebastian,
No.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield.
No.
Motion fails 2-3.
Wow.
Approval of the minutes. I need a motion to approve November 16th, the work session, and November 20th, the regular meeting. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. King. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Any discussion on the minutes? Mrs. Hagan, will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
Treasurer's report. Motion passes 5-0, sorry. I'm sorry?
Oh, they were saying that's the reason we voted out, but I wasn't running, so I just wanted to clarify for everyone. Make sure that's clear.
Okay. I missed it. Okay, next up is the treasurer's report. Mrs. Hagan, would you please take the steering wheel?
Sure. First up is the bank reconciliation for the month of November. Happy to report that we do balance. When you see payroll December 1st, there's no problem with the payroll, wasn't a problem with the payroll. It's just it posted to our bank before December 1st so that we could get everybody paid. So in order to get our books balanced as of November 30th, I had to add it back into the bank balance. So I don't want to scare anybody with that big old number that hits out there, but that's just because when you have payroll on the 1st, you got to send the file to the bank on the 28th or 29th to make sure everybody gets paid. General fund report, we're running pretty good overall. So I'm pretty pleased with where we're at. Still running a little low on the expenditures, but that's always a good sign, not a bad sign. So let's see here. And then we're on to the monthly financial report. Revenue snapshot, as you know, with the increased funding from the Fair School Funding Plan, our funding from ODE or DEW now has grown quite a bit. We're up 1.2 million for year to date. Interest is still coming in strong. We're now 57% more than we collected last year. Rollback and homestead are up by 13%, which is an increase of 34,000. And our payment in lieu of taxes are up almost 300,000 compared to this time last year. So overall, we're up 27.38% in the revenue side. So we look at expenses, salaries and benefits are up 150,000 over the last 5 months. Combined, all expenses have gone down by 14%. And equipment expenses are down nearly 20,000 as we look to see what's needed in the new buildings and go forward. So purchase services are running great versus the forecast. So we're looking pretty good. And overall expenses are down 6%. Overall, we have $7,328,946 in true days cash. That's 137. And so I think that's the best we've looked in quite a while. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then in our construction account, right now we have $991,000 available. And as we try to close out, I know everybody's in the new building and loving it, but I'm still dealing on the accounting side. As we close out the construction project, we'll have a better feel for where we are and where we can go from there. So, but as we enter the holiday season, I'm quite thankful for this forecast, this financial report. And then last but not least is our investment for the COPS project. Everything is liquid at this point. I think I'm holding on to about 5 million, if I remember correctly, to finish out the project and get us all reimbursed for the cost that we've incurred. So we did incur a little bit of a loss due to having, some of our investments too far out, but I'm happy to report with interest rates and new investments, we've recouped all of that loss. And we actually made money in the end of things with the investment. So it was pretty good, pretty happy about that. So then we have our detailed check register for all the checks that were cut in the month of November. Those will be uploaded to Ohio Checkbook as soon as the board approves it. Amended certificate, which is an appropriation recap, which is a fancy way of saying our anticipated revenues and budgets. We had to add a few accounts, some 019s for grants that were approved last month, and also as we move forward with some student activities. So I need your approval to accept the new revenue estimates and the new appropriations so that we can get those to the Miami County auditor. Also need your approval to create student activity accounts for the Tabletop Gaming Club, which was approved by the board November 22nd, 2021 to create, and we waited 2 years to make sure they were still a viable club. They are. Mr. DeLoma is still their advisor as far as I know, and so we'd like to create an account for them, and then the green team as well. So I need your approval on that. Open to any questions you might have.
I have one with the certificate of participation. Are those now in a high yield savings account since the final maturity was the end of November?
Yes.
Okay,
Great. Keeping it liquid for us, so as we close out the project, the money's available.
I just wanted to, I assumed that was the case, but thank you for clarifying. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see. Apologize. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for the treasurer's report, please? I'll move. Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. May I have a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Any further discussion? Okay. Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian? Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Chris?
Thank you. Good evening to and welcome everyone that's with us here in person and also online. Diving right into the superintendent's report, we have important dates, and again, as we continue to work and better communicate what's actually going on those dates, you'll notice district closed instead of no classes. That means no teachers, no students, but no classes. That's going to be a day that teachers are here in some respect, as well as administrators, but there are no classes being held for students. And then we've also recognized our federal holidays. Probably the most important day, aside from all the holidays, is that we welcome kids back January 3rd after what hopes to be a meaningful and restful break. Going on to, I'm going to skip down to personnel and just quickly say, well, we'll have that updated on the website later this week, but touch off card.
You did, yes.
That's not attendance, but that's okay. Our attendance is pretty much balancing at 1997. I believe is what the number, but you can leave it.
Yeah.
There we
Yep, 1969, sorry. Once you add in the young fives, you can get up to 1997. So. But I'll slip back up into personnel because we get very little personnel traffic, as we should in December. But we've been very active. There we go. Thank you. I asked Mrs. Pyron to go back and look at just resignations over the last 3 years, just to get you know, people have said, is this an unusual year? Is it abnormal? Or is this a trend? And again, this is just 3 data points, but you can see we've for me, my opinion, my experience, we've been going through about 17% is the average there in turnover, just sheer resignations, just teachers. That's not the admin thrown in. A little bit less with our classified folks. And so I bring this up for a couple of reasons. Number one is there's a lot of research out there, and I've said this before to this group, a lot of research out there on what moves the needle as far as student learning. Is it money we spend per student? Is it the books? Is it the curriculum? Is it the building? And you can find articles, research that say, argue against all of those. One that you can't find arguing against is teacher in the classroom. You got to have effective teachers in the classroom every day. And, you know, we probably have 90 teachers 3 years ago. And losing that number, I think we're just over 100 with the new positions we've added. We've replaced a lot of folks. You know, it's hard to ensure that quality that Bethel is used to. The other piece, and I've heard, you know, folks talk about the culture and climate that's going on here in the district. It's hard to build culture and climate with this kind of turnover. Just is. And so, you know, we lose our traditions, we lose our rituals when folks leave us time and time again. And what it means to be part of Bethel local schools just isn't as strong. And so hopefully we're going to take some steps this evening in this next section to strengthen that and retain our teachers and reward them, and also attract good folks when we have openings. Hopefully those decrease as years go by here. So that's it for the superintendent's report. There are no questions. I'll move right into recommendations under business. Hearing none, I'll move on. Okay, so item A is our collective bargaining agreement, and just want to make sure I get this right. So I'm going to read to the crowd here. Positive financial trends, which we've been hearing about since the Fair School Funding Plan rolled out, has allowed us to propose this evening increases not just for teachers, but for all employees at Bethel local schools. I'd like to thank the Board of Education for granting Tina and I the flexibility to negotiate and pursue these groundbreaking initiatives differently than what's been done in the past year. I'd like to express my special appreciation to BA leadership, negotiations team for embracing that different approach. To our classified staff, Tina and I would like to thank you for your dedication to making our district run and for your patience in allowing us the time until we could fully address all job classifications. And then finally, to our administrators, we've made some strides with a new salary schedule, which we will roll out later. But we will continue to work and make sure that we have the same presence and competitiveness in the market as we are now going to have with our other classified and certified folks. So pending tonight's approval, the compensation package for all employee categories at Bethel Local will be competitive and offer incentives for those committed to the district. And those are really our primary goals in all these areas. To give folks just a glimpse of kind of where we're at with our certified schedule. Bachelor's degree step 15 and the master's degree step 15. If you compare those with the 9 other districts in the county and ones adjacent to us, it would have taken a 12% raise just to get us in the middle of the pack. We were not only dead last, we were that low. And so, and we ranked nearly last in every category, every step along the way, both masters and bachelors. So we had a ways to go. Where we ended up eliminating a step, but we added 4 and we made increases in 6 steps. And in 3 of those steps at 5, 15, and 25, actually added kickers. Again, looking to incentivize staying here at Bethel. Overall, it's a 14% increase for our certificated staff over 3 years. But still at the end, it's, instead of being at the bottom, we're still going to be in the middle. And, you know, we think that that's a good first step. It gets us going in the right trajectory for negotiations down the road. Other things that we were able to get accomplished with this agreement was going from 26 pays to 24 pays. Less confusion and a little easier on the fiscal group. We increased supplemental pay for subbing and home instructions and other extra duty assignments. We increased the severance package for our teachers. We changed the reimbursement for our unused personal days to what I think is substantial. And we added supplemental positions. That's not so much for the teachers as it was for our programs that are growing, musical and athletics. So those are some of the highlights. And very proud, I think it's speaking the same for Tina, in presenting the CBA to the board in May. Tina, anything you want to add? Yeah.
No, I think we covered it all.
Under the classified schedule, that was a little more hard. It was a little more difficult to comparisons, but you know, some of the highlights of things that really needed to get needed attention was that you know, currently we have 4 classifications, job positions, if you will, that are below $15 an hour. I think the first one starts at $12.54. Then we have 3 below 16. First shift custodian at step 0 is only $3 less than the 25-year veteran. And then the steps, depending on what job classification you were in, the steps vary. You'd be getting 0.5% at step 3 as a custodian, but as a secretary, you're getting 3%. And so those were some of the oddities that we kind of jumped out at us and we looked to fix. So now we have what we're proposing in this classified schedule is that there are 0 classifications below $15 and only 4 below $16 an hour. Those are entry level. The difference between the first year custodian and the year 25 custodian is going to be almost $8. And then all steps are going to be 2.25%, except for like the teachers, 5, 15, and 25. I think 5% is what we bumped those up again, trying to incentivize folks to continue to stay at Bethel and reward them for being at Bethel. So very excited about classified salary schedule. Good. Okay.
And the index for each one is the same. Every classification has the same index when they move from step to step to step, which is similar to what teachers have, but not based upon education like teachers, but based upon years of service. So, you know, the secretary jumps up in a step the same way anybody else would. So it's sort of more fair across the board, I guess. I didn't quite understand all the different indexes, so I fixed that.
So the administrative salary schedule, we didn't work on as much. We did a lot of comparative for principal jobs, athletic director position that we did last year. And what we ended up with was, but we knew we wanted to put in place something that gave future superintendents, treasurers, starting place, a range to, depending on education, experience, to place those folks instead of just randomly picking something out of the air. So, so the administrative salary schedule then is, it's set up by position. For most of them, it's either master's either plus 15 or 30, and then doctorate, and then the range is usually a $7,500 range. So again, it's a starting place, which we've not had before, and so it's a guide in that way. It's also hopefully it'll be an incentive then for our administrators to continue their education, and also, later down the road, if we want to do merit-based type increases, we have the range and capacity to do those types of things. Administrator, okay. Would you like to talk about the review and approve of the resolution for tax budget 2024?
So as you know, we have to do a tax budget every year. To do in January this year, the Miami County Auditor's Office has requested that it be submitted prior to January 20th. There are 2 resolutions that have to be passed. This is the first one, just allowing us to do an alternative tax budget rather than the very lengthy tax budget that's usually in effect. So I'm asking the board to pass this tonight. And then in January, we will pass the second resolution and the actual tax budget, and it needs approved. So the tax budget in and of itself is just me certifying that the district does indeed need our tax dollars. So please send them to us. So we're going to definitely get that done and submitted before January 20th. So. Okay.
Great, thank you. Item E, as we continue to look forward and look for ways to manage our growth and continue to grow as a district, these job descriptions we finally received from Montgomery County ESC, which is where we get job descriptions from, to get those recognized by the board. Assistant superintendent position that has also been included on the administrative salary schedule. Assistant athletic coordinator, which is a teacher on special assignment position, and also the dean of students position, which really is more of a middle school, high school position, teacher on special assignment, in the event that, and we're probably going to need 1 or 2 of those. So anyways, putting those forward. Club proposals, so excited. 2 more clubs, this time at the middle school, with God's Gang proposal and debate club. Item G is an annual nutritional compliance report that I have to make Bonnie McInthaller's word that we are compliant with FDA standards, and that we are, and that's been seconded by Hope and Danielle. We have our OSBA, annual OSBA renewal, the 2024 Legal Assistant Fund membership. Tina, anything?
No, these are OSBA, is the Ohio School Boards Association. The board and most all districts in Ohio join because it offers you guys additional training, and that's the Capitol Conference, as well as other materials that are good for the boards to have. And then they also have the Legal Assistance Fund when there's a problem that affects all districts in Ohio and we need their assistance. And it's only $250 a year, but I think that's very imperative that we keep that. So that's my recommendation. And then we have a donation.
We have a donation from Reagan Butler for school supplies for $255. Thank you. And those are all the recommendations under business for December 18th.
May I have a
23.
motion? Yeah, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for business items, please? Yes. Oh, yeah.
Before we make a motion, can I ask to have, 3 items separated, please? Or do you want me to make that after the motion?
Which items, we can redo the motion since nobody made a motion yet. Which ones do you want to?
I would like to see separate votes on A, B, C, and E, please.
So 4 items?
Yes, please.
A, B, C, and D. Okay. Okay, so we need a motion for the approval of the consent agenda for business items excluding items A, B, C, and E. Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. Any discussion?
Okay, so just so I make sure we're doing, this motion is excluding. I want to make sure I write this down correctly, excluding A, B,
I just wanted a separate vote on each.
Right.
C and E.
C, and E. Right,
ABC.
okay. Got it.
Any discussion?
So for item F, no problem whatsoever with either club. My question is, who's the advisor for God's Game? Because I see that was submitted by a student. So we have permission to
We
use
do.
someone's room, but we don't have anyone
Let's see,
listed.
Bob.
Is she actually the advisor? For it's worded weird, but just says you can use a room. Is that the same as being?
It's
An
listed
advisor?
classroom / advisor.
Okay.
Yeah.
That clarification is all I needed.
Yep.
So as long as it's cool on that, then that's good.
Mhm.
And then I just want to make sure. Yep, good. All of
Okay,
them?
any other discussion? Mrs. Hageman, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue, Mr. King.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Now we'll go back and I need a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. And this is item A on the agenda, Mrs. Hageman,
Yes.
lest there be any confusion. Is there any discussion?
I would say that I'm glad that we were able to come to a resolution that we can increase the pay for our teachers. And though that I believe we're not there yet for what we should be paying them, this is a great opportunity for us to advance that so that you continue to grow with the growth of our school. And as you have stated, the key ingredient for us to educate with excellence is the teachers in the classroom. And so this is a great opportunity for us to at least recognize that and put support behind.
I agree 100%, and I hope that their school funding continues to be funded from the biennium budgets going forward, and that it ends up fully funded, but we'll see how that goes. That's a little tenuous every single time the biennium comes around, so hopefully that continues, as well as our levies that are part of our budgeting every single time. So hopefully we can continue to have the funds coming in to be able to continue to fully fund our teacher contracts and raise them to be paid.
So I just wanted to add, the reason why I asked for it to be separated is I think it's important enough on its own that it should have its own separate vote.
I have one favor. If you were on the collective bargaining team, would you please stand so you can be recognized? I will just say, in my 8 years on the board, I am thrilled that I'm closing out my tenure with them, hopefully having a successful vote and approved BA contract 7 months before expiration. We've had some very rough years, and I'm very proud in our administration, Mr. Kristen, Mrs. Hageman, and Mrs. Hatter, and our BEA team, that were able to accomplish it. I believe they reached a TA in one day. It was approved by their BEA shortly after Thanksgiving, and it's brought to mind for the board vote. So it's a really, really huge milestone for our district and a lot of progress. So thank you all for your work.
I'd just like to echo everybody and to see the first significant raise probably in 10 to 15 years that we've had here for staff. So thank you very much. raise.
So take it and we'll get called to roll for item E.
Sure. Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes,
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next up, I need a motion to approve the classified schedule as listed effective July 1st, 2024. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Elam, and will you second, Mrs. Mansfield? Thank you. Any discussion?
Same,
Yeah. I was gonna-
same.
And I am so thrilled, like when I saw the table and it's got consistent percentages across, it's a huge win for the treasury department. And for the employees. I don't mean that, but I mean, it's very straightforward how the steps are handled, and it makes sense. So thank you for redoing that. I don't know how much time you and Mackenzie put in, but it is greatly appreciated.
Mr. Elam.
Yes, Mr. Elam, Mrs. Mansfield seconded.
Okay, making sure.
Any other discussion? Okay, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
yes,
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. And third, we will need a motion for the administrative salary schedule.
Trying to write everyone quickly, so I apologize that I'm not clapping. Thank you.
We need a motion to approve the administrative salary schedule, please. Item C on the agenda.
I was gonna ask you, but I
You said before.
yeah, I wanted to ask, since we just received this basically on Saturday, I don't feel that we've had enough time to really review things. That's where I stand. But I was wondering, can we delay this a meeting so we can look at this a little bit more? I certainly haven't had enough time to review things where I'm comfortable. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, but
I mean, it was in draft view, it was in draft view on Friday when we was at the meeting. We've had draft view for some days,
and
longer than Saturday. The public may not have had it before Saturday, but we certainly had access before that.
okay, so we got it. So if I saw it Saturday morning or Friday evening, again, I already had bothered Mr. Crispin a couple of times over the weekend, and I'm just asking for more time to review things, that's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. May I have a motion to approve item C, the administrative salary schedule, please? Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. King. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I was able to review it very quickly. It's laid out very nicely. Easy to understand format, talking about the ranges of salary based on what positions are in the school, as well as education and fringe benefits that would be associated. So make it very easy for us to establish ranges for hiring versus each time we're going to hire a new administrator, we have to sit around with the board. So there's a delay in us deciding what we wanted to advertise it for, what is the minimum or the maximum. This kind of locks it in. It is not over high end. Looks like we're at the middle to low end of the spectrum based on all of the preliminary reports that we received from Mr. Crispin. So I feel very comfortable voting on this, whether
And to piggyback on that, we were also given a chart of similar districts and area districts with the same exact information for those same positions. So we can, it's just ranges of values for those districts and ranges of values that we're going to go with based on those. So it's not high tech. We're not doing a whole lot of analysis here. So that's why it's not a difficult decision for me to decide to go with that either.
Well, the one thing about the salaries that were listed, there's no mention of the number of years that those positions, those particular like, for example, the principals had. So I was trying to get a feel for the number of years to the salary that was based on.
And this is a first step, Natalie. I would expect over time that may develop into a more comprehensive step schedule. But sure, right now, that's what we were able to do.
This is on the range of values, this is a big $15,000 range of dollars to be able to operate at the low or the high end. It's a pretty significant range based on experience. And compared to what we know our principals make now, it falls in line with the experience ranges that we've had recently. So it's not that different than what we've done.
And I just like to read something. I wrote this about, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, but I thought it was appropriate. I didn't know if I'd read it tonight, but I think competitive pay has become an issue for many districts and businesses, especially during and after the pandemic. As I listened to various people, competitive pay has been a problem for some time at Bethel, probably at least 20 to 30 years, maybe even well before that. In addition, we have grown from a relatively small rural district of 900 students to a mid-sized rural suburban district of 2,000 students, approximately. As you have pointed out with teacher pay, it will not be an easy problem to solve with the salary schedule. We've tried to do that tonight. Plus, we have to factor in all the employees, something the board and I were very firm about, classified staff, other certified staff, and administrators. Consider as we approved food service workers this past June agenda. We have 2 cafeteria workers with 26 years of experience who each will make $15.61 an hour for the 23-24 school year. I think saying less is more in this case, and Mrs. Hageman has corrected that in the current classified schedule. And yes, you might be surprised I list administrators in the above list, because the perception from most Bethel people, or at least those who speak at board meetings, is we overpay our administrators. But that's not reality. Just as an example, we recently had a central office staff member resign, and after being offered an approximately $20,000 increase to perform the same job in another district. We also had a principal resign this past summer and accepted a similar job, but has less students to oversee and is likely making approximately $30,000 more than what Bethel offered her. And if you look at our other administrator salaries, similar comparisons can be made. Tip City at the time had just hired a treasurer with similar experience to our treasurer and is making $155,000. Tonight, if Mrs. Hageman's contract is approved, she will be at $135,000. Although these problems seem challenging, and again, I wrote this in June or sometime around there, I'm hopeful with the upcoming teacher negotiations and the state approved fair school funding plan that we can make some progress. Further, I have great confidence that our superintendent, Matt Crispin, and our treasurer, Tina Hageman, have the skills and expertise to propose potential solutions and a path forward. We have a significant contingent in our community who do not want taxes raised. No new levies. Yet some of these same people stand up and tell us we need to pay our people, like teachers, competitively. It's like going to the grocery store now and expecting to pay 2019 prices. The math just does not compute. So I will just leave that there, but I wanted to publicly read that. So I appreciate the comments, and I truly, truly appreciate all the time and effort Mr. Crispin and Mrs. Hageman and her staff have put in. This is a huge deal to get competitive salaries for all of our staff.
Thank you, Lori. I just wanted to note that the principal left for Oakwood Schools, which we don't really compare to. So just for that extra bullet point. $30,000 extra dollars.
No, with the central office staff person didn't go to Oakwood. Weren't you?
Oh, no. Frank.
And just as another example, we had a recent principal who took a $10,000 pay cut to come. That's great, don't get me wrong, but that's not reasonable to expect people to take pay cuts when they come to that. That's not gonna improve our retention, in my opinion.
And I didn't say that the people weren't worth it or that the ranges weren't acceptable. I just asked for a delay for another month to consider them a little further. That's all. I wanted that opportunity because 2 days doesn't really cut it for me. But that's where I stand.
Your concerns have been noted, Mrs. Donahue. If there's no further discussion, I would like to call the roll, please.
Before we do that, let me just ask, is there anyone else who feels they need more time for the other board members? Anyone else?
we need more time. I just wanted to get a majority feel for that. before we
Sure,
proceed.
no,
Is that
thank
okay?
you.
Okay. All right.
Just one word, I think somewhere, Natalie, maybe I misheard you, a question about years of experience and steps versus like this open range. We actually started at steps. Steps, my experience has been steps, steps are just steps. Usually somewhere in there, you have language that says the superintendent reserves the right to place anybody on the salary schedule where they want to go. And a lot of times that goes out the window because you're bringing somebody in from maybe a suburban district that's been an assistant or something like that. Now they want to be your principal. And they've been making a lot more than what our current, principal spot makes. And you end up doing all kinds of weird placings, and it's really not accurate. That's why a range kind of lets you maybe fit somebody in without saying, well, they only have 2 years of experience, but I had to put them on step 8 on our schedule in order to at least make it a lateral financial move or a little bit more. So just, that's why we went away from steps and went from.
I understand. I also understand it's a personal decision when they come to Bethel, if they want to, work here for the salary they're offered. So I appreciate that. Thank you for the discussion.
Okay. So, Mrs. Sebastian?
And just to clarify, we are currently voting on C, administrative salary schedule. I apologize, but we had a lot of discussion there.
Yes.
Yes, my vote is yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
No,
Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Next up are the job descriptions, item E. That's the last one, correct, Mrs. Donahue?
yeah, yes, please.
No problem. May I have a motion to add item E, the job descriptions for the 3 proposed positions to the. May I have a motion for that? Yeah, for the job descriptions,
I'll
yes. Thank you, Mr. Elam. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. King. Discussion.
I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more. What is teacher on special assignment? Does that mean a current teacher would assume that role, or are you thinking a student teacher from, doing their, I apologize, can't think of what that's called, student teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, this would be a licensed teacher. TOSL or teacher on special assignment is it is a quasi administrative position. For instance, a dean of students usually handles discipline, low-level discipline, anything under suspension, as well as attendance. But they're not on an administrative schedule. They remain a member of the union, and that's where their salaries, their salary placement.
so.
So it's a teacher, but doing duties outside, different than teaching.
Well, I just wonder how they manage that time, because we're already swamped on having enough teachers in the classroom. So how do they manage all that?
Well, it's not a teaching assignment, so they're not teaching classes. The students works in your office, that's where they're at, handling discipline, attendance. They're almost like an assistant principal, but they don't have an administrative license, so they can't suspend and do those higher level discipline tasks. So, but then they're paid as a teacher. They also don't do evening activities like an administrator would.
It's kind of like how counselors are on the teacher's contract, but they are in the office,
Yes,
very much like that.
yes, good comparison. Except we don't call them teachers on special assignment.
Right.
They're
But it's
in the
similar
bargaining unit. Yeah,
day
yeah.
responsibility.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I know originally, we did try, students in the middle school probably 2016, 2017, quite some time ago.
Mm.
And it morphed into the assistant principal position. And then we didn't have a dean of students, so,
Yeah, and that's part of the reason, I mean, next year, we need, as our middle school, really our high school continues to grow. Mr. Swope is awesome, but he can't do it all by himself, so he's gonna need some help, and so just to give us latitude, to either be an assistant principal position, if, the board says, no, we don't wanna go that far yet, my backup would be a dean of students or two, so, yeah, so it just gives us that latitude.
Yeah, it's my understanding that we were just voting on the job descriptions just so they were in place in case we were going to go in that direction for growth down the road. Kind of as we've been laying out, we're not going to hire or advertise a position if we don't have a position description ahead of time. And so this is really just approving these position descriptions to have on hand as growth occurs, as the need arises, then we can move forward with those. These are also, I think, the projected positions down the road as we see growth. If growth doesn't happen, then they won't be needed, but we know that's not true. So this is getting ahead of the game, of the curve.
My question for you was, when we worked with our original vendor for the job descriptions, I believe they had said that anything in black we could change and things in red we could not. Does that mean you've already gone through what we see here? Is everything in black's already been edited to meet your needs?
Yes.
Just double checking, thank you. I forgot, we ran out of time at our agenda meeting. You're back at next meeting, so I didn't get a chance to ask you that. Sorry, I apologize.
No worries.
Should have emailed you, followed up on that.
thanks. And then, thank you for pointing that out. And with all the other things that we had on the agenda for tonight, again, I don't know why this couldn't have waited. There was a real rush or need to get this on there tonight, but
Just when I received them, we'd actually asked Montgomery County ESC and going back and forth with the edits. I think Shelley started that end of October, early November, so we're on a different time schedule, unfortunately.
thank you.
Thanks. All right, any other discussion? Okay, will you call the roll, Mrs. Hageman?
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next, we
Wait.
have, go ahead, sorry.
It's occurred to me that I voted incorrect.
Okay.
Sorry. How can I amend that?
Number
Can I amend
one.
that?
Hey,
And
A, yes.
do we want to, Mr. Elam to abstain, change his vote, or?
Yes.
Or
It's
do you
fine
want
with
to take
me.
the vote
as well.
again?
What do you guys want to do? It's fine with me.
Okay, was an edit.
Okay with an edit.
Edit to
We have to-
abstain, correct?
I think
Order
just
revote.
to
Okay.
cover ourselves efficiently, and we should vote to cancel the vote
Okay.
and then vote again.
Yeah, thank
Oh
you.
my God, minutes are gonna be crazy.
Yes, they are.
This time. That's all right. So.
I
we're
make a
gonna-
motion
Okay.
to rescind the 5-0 vote for the item A for the collective bargaining agreement.
I'll second. You'll get Ms. Mansfield seconds. That's
Okay, Ms. Mansfield. All right.
Mr. King.
Got it.
Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
All right. Mrs. Mansfield. Mr. King.
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue.
Yes.
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
that's a little jumpy.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
Okay.
Now I need a motion. Now we're gonna revote on item A to employ classified staff.
Approve the
Vote
collective bargaining,
To approve the
Collective-
collective
I'm sorry,
bargaining
you're
agreement.
24 to 27.
I make that motion.
Oh, goodness.
second, just like originally.
Okay, Mr.
Same
King
motion,
and
same
Mrs.
seconds on all this. That makes it easier.
Okay,
Okay.
so then we'll start with Mr. Elam, who will, thank you.
I'm sorry to cause-
That's all right. Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes. 100% yes.
okay, Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mansfield.
Totally, yes.
Okay, clap. Nice, fast, okay, all right, great.
Motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention.
Okay,
I apologize. Business, all right.
And all the first and seconds were the same two people, so
Yes,
no
that's
problem with
right.
the minutes.
Okay.
Easy peasy.
if I can remember my notes, I'll probably have to rely on you two, but we'll get there.
You just call me.
Not to bring the chocolate.
I got it right here.
So that's
We're up
all the
for-
business, and so we're up to the income tax.
Item 6.
No.
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 Item
I,
5 still has
We
some
have-
things.
okay.
Oh,
No.
Oh, we did already.
Item L.
Item L, last month we passed a board resolution allowing me to ask the state how much our 0.75% levy would bring in, and if we made it continuing, that amount came back as $2,124,000, which is equivalent to more than 10 mils in property taxes if we were to ask for property taxes. So I was a little surprised by that number. But this second resolution is a resolution to proceed. Again, not increasing any of the income tax, but asking the community to approve it as a continuing. As I stated earlier, we're looking better than we've ever looked as far as the 5-year forecast in a long time. Or at least from the time I can look back and view. But all of my estimates and 5-year forecast includes this much needed revenue source to keep the trajectory for the increases for the teachers and to keep us competitive. If we were to lose that revenue source, it would be very, very bad for the district. It would be very material. It would change a lot of the things. To use some treasurer, I couldn't sign a 412, which is my signature saying, yes, we can afford to give these raises. Yes, we can cover, all of this stuff that we're doing. If we do not have the income tax, I would not be able to do that. And we would have to go back. Income tax expires in 2025. We want to get it on the ballot as quickly as possible. And so this is the second resolution I'm asking you to approve. So, but it does make it continuing, but no additional taxes being asked of the community.
Okay, may I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Discussion.
So I have a discussion point. Sure. So I think we received a lot of feedback from the community with regards to this being a continuing levy or a continuing tax item versus it repeating every 5 years, or so that they felt like they had a choice in saying no to this or could change it. And I heard them, I read all those emails, and I look back and I think we've set our community has set us many things, as in we need to support our teachers. Let's not do this, get rid of federal funding, and we'll pass our own levy to support the school and not follow those federal rules. Yet here we are asking to secure a dedicated source of funding for the school so that it is not in balance or having bow waves of funding, depending on what the state legislature does. This establishes a true baseline for us to move forward to support our teachers in our school. It clearly puts that forward. Our job, I think, as the school board is to propose what we think is in the best interest of the school. I understand that community members may not agree, and that's why we put it on a ballot. But our job is to say what is best for the school. And then it goes to the ballot, and then the community says, Do we agree with supporting the teachers, staff, and the school? Or do we not? Or do we want something different? Right? By passing this allows us to say, this is what's needed to balance the school across this entire foundation. Sustain funding so we can have the right amount of teachers and staff to support our students. That's what we're supposed to do. So that's why my vote is yes for this. For it to go to the ballot, and then the community can say, no. Then we come back and realign, and with the new board that will be here, can then realign that to what they feel is the most appropriate to support this school. But us going out is saying, this is what will sustain our school. We clearly forecast that. We show in the most transparent financial system the schools had. So, because in the past, no one could ever see anything. Now we have the checkbook online, we have all those pieces. Everybody, we put everything on the website. You can see who got what check. It's easy. So that is why this is going forward. And then the new board can then decide whatever new trajectory the school is going to go through if it doesn't pass. But we have to turn it in tomorrow.
Yeah, I have to run down to the board of elections tomorrow because the due date is the 20th. So if we could wait, I would suggest we do that, but we can't if we want it on the March ballot. Those are not my deadlines. Those are imposed by the state and board of elections. So I always try to avoid a presidential election. So you don't want to put that on the ballot along with the presidential election. But, it's my suggestion because like I said, we get our revenue in two ways, right? We get state funding, all districts do, and we wait with bated breath sometimes, and I pray every night before they make a decision that they'll do the right thing and fund our public schools. But we get it in property taxes and we get it in income taxes, right or wrong, that is how schools are funded. Income taxes, especially this income tax, which is at 0.75%, is on earned income. So we're not taking it from pensions or anything like that. We're taking it from earned income, and it brings in $2.1 million a year. Which if we had to ask for property taxes would be 10.2 something. And I would think that's unreasonable to ask of our community. So if you put it on as continuing, you never have to worry about losing it. And if I were from a financial standpoint, giving my best recommendation, if you were to let anything go or reduce anything, I would suggest you reduce property taxes and not your income taxes on earned income. Whether or not we can do that, I don't know, because that's all dependent upon state funding and how things run. But I would never ask I think that's the most fair tax, less invasive. Nobody likes taxes, I don't either. So, but that's just my professional recommendation to the board.
Well, and it makes it more difficult for us to increase it.
Correct.
So without you knowing it. So you
Right.
can think that you're voting yes again in 5 years for the same amount, and it's different.
Right.
And so this kind of sets the bar there at that 0.75. So that it's very difficult then to change it, because now you're having to do a whole new campaign to say this is an additional.
Right.
Versus trying to float it as the same thing coming again. So.
Mr. Hageman, we, as far as I can remember, every 5-year forecast has said pending passage of these particular levies.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tina, for walking us through that. I voted yes in the November meeting because I believe in the process of putting this on the ballot, and that was the first step. I also am not a fan of continuing levies because you don't get that break and that opportunity to say so. And I remember in 2019 sitting out in the audience in one of the public participations saying that I was not a fan of like an open checkbook, because really you never get out of that unless you die. It's just like, federal taxes. You don't get out of that unless you die or you're fortunate enough to retire. So I like to have the opportunity in between then to be able to make sure that I'm voting for what I believe in and I see the future of the school. That's where I stand. Thank you.
As I recall, when we first put this on years ago, one of the purposes of it was to help reduce levy fatigue, so that we weren't voting on a tax levy every other year, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm retired. I can tell you that I pay no school tax on that, income tax on that. That's correct. I pay school tax. Property tax, that's correct. That's correct. So this would be another way to reduce that affliction, if you will.
Also, in review of Board of Election requirements, we cannot change this resolution to anything else than what we voted on the first time. Otherwise, this would be a first reading as well. Which then we wouldn't meet the timeline to file it.
Right, what we all voted on in November was a continuing levy, and now we're done. Right, this is continuing tax request. We can't go back on that now unless we don't do this tonight, so. We knew in November that was what we were asking.
And many of you know, I chaired levies back in 2012 and chaired the 2014 bond issue that the facility we're currently sitting in. At that time, we had 4 renewable levies. We were able to get one of the PI levies continuing, I believe. This is the next step in that process. We would still have 2 levies to vote on. And my kids will be out in a couple of years, but as a resident and a taxpayer, I do find it morally reprehensible that people would say, well, I don't like the superintendent or I don't like the board, so I'm not going to pay my taxes in the school anymore. I think, make your changes, vote board members in and out, but don't take it out on our staff. I think that's morally reprehensible. It's just my personal opinion. Any further discussion?
Just like I said, the minutes reflect that we just approved this evening, that just said that we approved a resolution to renew the earned income tax as continuing, and it was voted on 5-0 in November. We all knew it would be continuing then.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
No.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. Next up is item M, which I think, is that Mrs. Hageman?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
me.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we put out a request for proposals on the farm lease. We got one back. And it's our current leaser, I can't say it right.
Fine.
Thank you. So I was suggesting that we take a look at it. It's got an odd year based on when we put this out to bid last time, or propose, not bid, the proposals. And so what I would like to do is be able to sort of negotiate with him on an adjusted calendar or an adjusted time frame so that we can get it to run from January to December. If I can have the board's okay to do that, that way we can move forward, and then it's not over until March 1st, so we can pass or approve the new lease in January, so no rush. That's why I wanted to sort of just have a review and discussion with the board, if it's okay that I negotiate on the board's behalf as we move forward and try to get this on a better calendar. So, and we'll have a new lease for the board to approve hopefully in January. So. Questions, concerns?
So you don't want a motion?
No,
Okay.
I'm just giving you an update and where I'm gonna try and get the calendar, get it to be more like January through December instead of March through February, it's a little odd. And I know it doesn't really work with planning and everything that he needs to do or any farmer will.
And so the plan is to do a 2-year, 10-month lease, and then the past one was a 2-year lease, is that correct?
Yeah, we can either do 2 years, 10 months, 3 years, 10 months, something, whatever the board would be comfortable with.
Natalie and Danny, do you have thoughts since you're gonna be here in January? Are you okay with 2 years, 10 months? Yeah, and Mr. Benham has been very
Oh, yeah.
receptive. I mean, he was great when we were doing the construction and work with, so. he doesn't
And he's
mind
met
that.
all the lease requirements in the past and made his payments on time, so he's been great to work with on my end.
And I did want to let the community know, we only received one
One bid,
bid
yeah.
package, so we
Mhm.
had advertised. I just wanted to let everyone know.
They were
that
all
there
due
was-
by
yeah.
December 14th, and
So-
I only got one back, so, and that was from Mr. Bennett.
So I did want to mention that
Yeah.
publicly, just so people knew, we just had one.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to give everybody an update, and I will continue to talk to Mr. Benham and see where we can go from there.
is there anything else under business we need to touch base on?
That's it from me.
Okay.
Is that for you?
70 minutes worth, it's a record.
Okay.
Classified personnel, Mr. Crispin.
Great, thank you. Under item A, employee classified staff, we have 3 recommendations. Amanda MG for our BES Media Center aide, Danny Jones and Gail Rhodes to be on board instructors as needed. Again, as we continue to wrestle and get a handle on taking care of 2 buildings, much larger facility, more activities, different types of cleaning. This time, we're looking to add a secretarial position in our maintenance and grounds position. I think, eventually, we ever hit 2,700 students, 3,000 students, you start seeing district having like a shipping, receiving / person that handles a lot of your paperwork that's coming in and out for facilities and maintenance. And so we've been using Anna in that way, and it has been awesome. I think Tina's department would say the same thing, as well as Mr. Bird. So we have 3 substitutes to add under the for classified personnel. 2 leaves without pay for Terry Stanley and Justin Cromwell. And then 2 resignations, Guzel Sheba and Sevda Arembo. And Sevda was our first TL support specialist, and I'm sorry to see her go, but she had a great opportunity presented to her, and we thank her for kind of being that pioneer for us and wish her nothing but the best. Those are the recommendations for classified personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for classified personnel, please?
For letter B to be voted on separately, please.
Yes, so I guess I need a motion for approval of the consent agenda for classified personnel less item B. May I have a motion, please?
Motion.
You'll move, Natalie, you'll move.
Um,
Okay, Jacob, will you second?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. King. Any discussion? Mrs. Hagan, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. That for items A, C, D, and E under classified personnel. Now we need a motion to employ the classified transfers listed. May I have a motion, please? Item B.
Motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Second. Thank you, Mr. Elam. Discussion. Discussion.
Item B. For item B?
Yeah.
Yes, please. So it looks like we're trying to accomplish 2 things here. First, the secretary duties are listed in the file attached. And then also we're going to approve that particular position and noted person for that. Going through some of those duties, if this is the final, I think it really needs to be, if this is a draft, I should say, then there needs to be some corrections made, some revisions. I think the person who is called the secretary duties for maintenance and custodial should not be collecting mail from all departments in both buildings. I guess that falls under a secretary duty, but not necessarily. I'm not sure how that falls into maintenance or custodial. And then a collection of lunch money from elementary and bringing it over to the central office. Again, I guess that's the secretarial duty based on this list, but I don't see how that falls under maintenance and custodial. I think this list needs to really be improved, and we should have approved that first before the position was brought to us. Now, I do understand that this person has been acting in that role, so you're trying to catch up to this a little bit. I know that she's been helping with some different tasks, and I just feel like this should have been brought to us in 2 steps, or at least identified that 2 things were happening here. And
So, okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, so points are well made, and I would go back to number one, the history of this district has been to have people wear multiple hats. Gail Rhodes, comes to mind right away, who was both EMIS and transportation person, and there was something else that she told me she did that I couldn't believe she was doing. And not finding fault with that. I think with a growing district, you get into those spots where it's like there's not enough to create an entire position. That's why we brought to the board last year the idea of an operations coordinator, because we were seeing these pieces that didn't really fit the facilities director, really didn't fit head cook, but they were becoming bigger tasks and responsibilities. So we do have a secretary job description that's already been approved. We already have a salary schedule. I provided these duties just to give you an idea of some of those outlying things that aren't getting covered, that need to get covered. And so, yeah, it's kind of one of those tweener positions, just kind of where we're at. As I said just a few minutes ago, once we're larger, we won't have anything like that. You'll have a shipping and receiving, probably 2 personnel handling all the stuff that's coming into the district daily, as well as some of those other pieces. So again, just kind of the what you go through with growth is as people become specialized, like you bring on a full-time EMIS person and a transportation person, what Gail used to do or Della used to do, and ends up, well, who's going to do it? And so get what you're saying, but that's what we're trying to accomplish. And we do have a secretary job description. These are just pieces that I wouldn't add to that job description, but I wouldn't create an entire new one for that. There's just not enough stuff.
I would have liked to have seen a lead custodial position, and then pulled out the things that are really dedicated to the maintenance and custodial side of the house. And some of these other things, I mean, I only listed the 2, but a couple of the other things, I can see other people absorbing those particular tasks in their current jobs. I just don't know that everybody who needs helpers at work gets them, so I can appreciate it, and that's why I thought something more meaningful for the custodial and maintenance side would have been more appropriate.
I mean, I just, some of your points are well taken, Natalie, honestly, they really are, but I have to say, at some point, we have to trust our superintendent, who is 34 years in education and has a great deal of experience on running districts, has been a superintendent for a great many years, and I think he knows what he's doing. And if this is what he feels like he needs, I think at some point we have to trust the man, his recommendation, and go with it. And stop like penny Annieing every single suggestion he makes about every single job that he needs. If he wants to put Anna Durst in that position doing these jobs, then let the man do it. Do his job. Stop nitpicking every decision he makes and puts in front of us over what duties he's going to assign his people. It's insane to me that we do this every single meeting. It makes me crazy, and I'm kind of glad that this is my last one because truly, oh, I know. Look, I'm with you. I'm with you. I know, right? Woo! Because I can't do it anymore. I cannot watch you put this man through this. He is a highly respected, educated professional who knows what he's doing. Stop. The same thing you do with Tina. I mean, Lord have mercy. I've worked in education for a ton of years myself, and there is no way any other superintendent would go through this at a board meeting. It does not happen anywhere else but here. It just
How many
doesn't.
board meetings have you been to other schools?
How many have I been to?
Other schools.
I've worked in 3 other districts,
Okay, good, thank you.
and I've gone to a ton of meetings. How many have you gone to?
We're not at public participation.
Yep.
All right, so moving on, staying on track, right? So Natalie does bring up really good points. I think, I don't have a problem moving forward because these are things that have been identified now that we're in a 2-building district, things that we couldn't foresee because we've never been more than a 1-building district. But I would rather see the duties better outlined in alignment with a regular position description like we have for everything else and what we've been driving for. And so maybe that's just a little piece of this one, a little bit of this temporarily until we see the growth and we need that. I don't have a problem moving forward because you've clearly identified the duties and that Ms. Durst will actually understand what she's actually required to do for her job. So as is listed there. But I would say in the future, that should transition into a true position description of uniqueness with some flexibility. And that's kind of difficult.
Yeah, I get it. I just don't want to pay Montgomery ESC, Montgomery County ESC, another $100 to morph this, not just yet, not just yet, but I totally get it, totally get it.
Well, if I may,
Yes,
again, it's not about the person
sure.
at all.
No.
And I hope that didn't come across that way because it's not. The second thing is trust but verify, and you have to ask questions to verify. So that's where I stand on that. And I will continue to do that. And there's never any intent behind it other than to ask and verify. That is all.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. Mrs. Hagan, and will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabat.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. That was item D, employee classified transfers. I just want to make sure.
Correct, yes.
I think we're up to recommendation certified personnel, Mr. Crispin, number 7, correct?
Thank you much. Okay, proud to announce, excited to announce that we have a recommendation for our head varsity softball coach, Joe Yao, who's has quite a bit of experience behind him, most notably at down the road at Wayne in the same capacity. So he brings lots of experience, and we're looking forward to his leadership and taking the program where it's at and making it better. We have administrative contract recommendations for Mr. Cook, Technology Director for 1 year. Mrs. Hegman is on there at the board's request for that time period. Mrs. Jones, our elementary 3-5 principal for a 3-year contract, and Mr. Swope, our high school principal, for a 3-year contract as well. Corrections to supplementals, we have Mr. Cluth, who I think is just one supplemental behind Ms. Wolford for most supplementals. And but we have some corrections to do there by subtracting a step and adding a step. We have our monthly sub list from the ESC. And that's it for our recommendations for certificated personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for certified personnel, please?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. King. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ely. Discussion.
Yeah, I have some discussion on Mrs. Hageman's contract.
Okay,
I think that we might have missed a couple of things that would make her in line and the same as Mr. Crispin's contract, specifically the trying to find my notes here, sorry. The vacation days, I think, are not in line with Mr. Crispin's vacation days. And then I think there was something about maybe the severance was the other thing. And I think there was an email communication to the board about that. So if we could just agree to amend to include those terms as well. I mean, I propose that, I guess is what I'm saying about this. Is that the other ones? Yeah, there was a suggestion for some severance language. And
Were those corrected?
the number 14 for
the
number
current
14 for
contract,
contract termination and the vacation language.
I don't have to go through the fine detail. I'm
Right.
saying.
the current contract has 75 severance days, which is in line with the
Yeah.
recently negotiated VA contract, 13 holidays because of Juneteenth being added. And we made a contract amendment in 2021 to do the Medicare payroll tax pickup. So those three were all in this current contract, but what Light is proposing
Yeah,
is
there's some contract termination language and then some vacation days that bring her in line. What's in Mr. Crispin's contract, I believe.
I don't think, I'm not sure, I would have to check his contract for the severance, I'm not sure. His severance.
It's a
was-
little different. Actually, I think his is better, but that's okay.
It's
good. I mean, I don't want him to.
Correspondence. Read the emails today. I
Just
don't know.
pick me, yeah.
No, I just didn't check this out, so
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to do that, it's.
So I know there was a time, I mean, I'm sure that John can whip
Yes.
it up and align it, but if you guys are okay with that, those go ahead and doing that change now.
So we need an amended motion, I don't remember, sorry.
It's okay.
It's
B.
under item B.
I made the motion. I would include the changes, the amended changes.
Which are for the vacation days and for the calculation of severance, okay.
And the termination. Item 14 termination.
Termination language too, okay. Nice. Well, will you, is this
Approved.
amended? I'm sorry.
I'm in.
Approved. Okay, so we're amending the motion. Mr. King amended the motion, Mr. Ely second. Any further discussion? All right. Okay. So, okay. So now we're voting on item 7 to approve the consent agenda for certified personnel with the 3 changes noted for Mrs. Hageman's contract. Okay. If there's no further discussion, Mrs. Hageman, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
Mr. Ely.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
You.
Discussion, Mrs. Brewer and Mrs. Henry.
That's how
That's all I got.
I.
Thank you. For selfish reasons, by doing it early, we don't have to stress in the spring, and it goes in the summer, and seriously,
Thank you.
thank you to all of you. Thank you to the team.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. Somebody asked me once, why am I still teaching?
Just one.
Well,
I get it almost every day.
this is my 26th year. Pascal, are you still in here? 26 years. I do question why am I still doing it. Every time I show up for work, I might change a life for the better. A student, I changed my life. That's the invisible ripple effects. That's what I love about Bethel. You might graduate, you might have 4 kids, but you're still my Bethel senior. My head and my heart are engaged every day. I step foot in the contract will help me sleep better at night. Mr. Clue can buy a new car. This is door. This is why we teach. This is why we come to school. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brewer, and I just want to thank all the staff that have come tonight. I really appreciate you showing up tonight. I know it's a long week before Christmas, but thank you. Facilities Committee, Mr. Crispin.
Yeah, real quickly, we had our core meeting today. It's been a while since we last met, but we're down to 2 punch list items. Still having some issues caring for the floor, different type of material. It wasn't the court style that we wanted, if you remember that. So, but we have the actual manufacturers coming in Wednesday afternoon to meet with our custodians. They're bringing a cleaning crew with them. And so doing a little OJT Wednesday afternoon on the floors. Other than that, we're starting to get tack strips up and bulletin boards for so we don't have to staple stuff into the walls. Track still needs stripes, but that's not going to happen until the spring. And then we're going to have some discussions about sound system, projectors, and screen. That total, just for the sound system to be put in, be a shared sound system for cafeteria, gym, about 103,000, and then projector and screen, 32,000. So we do have some contingency funds, a little bit left, wouldn't cover all of it, but we're gonna. I know you're starting to twitch.
I am starting to twitch. You'll see my.
So maybe we can get our hands on some of that and think about getting that in, because yeah, it's a beautiful facility. We'd like to have our holiday concert in there next year and other performances. So
Is this the same vendor by any chance on the sound system and whatnot that did the alcohol?
I don't know who did that.
Sound Force. Because
Yeah.
Sound Force, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at Jeremy's email. I may have.
Because I know at some point that Jeremy had mapped out the lights or the microphones or something, but there's almost no one trained to use that thing. Maybe it's people actually trained to use our actual fabulous sound system.
Yeah,
Because
been
Jeremy
having some
retired.
conversations with a few of our staff members about that. So,
Okay, good. And if the vendor do that, if it's the same vendor, it'd be awesome to give it the, throw that in. Hey.
Roger that. Let's see.
And then just something else for the new board who are here tonight that you'll have to consider is there's also, we did not have the funding, do not have the funding for the visitor bleachers. So some kind of decision will need to be made with that to the tune of roughly $100,000. I don't know what the quote's gonna come in. It was 80,000 last year. But again, there's contingency there, but it's either that or rent again in the fall. So I mean, and they have to be ordered probably March timeframe. So I'm just letting you guys know, because that's an outstanding item, that there's nothing we can do at this point. They will be getting more funding in the athletic budget when they have the yearly, it's most of the donations were given on a 10-year basis or 5, so they will get another chunk in July. And it's up to her what she'll let you do and not do. I don't want to say borrowing, but you know what I'm saying, there will be more funding coming in. So, but there will have to be a decision made, or there is the funding. I think it was around 10,000 to rent them in the fall, but I mean, I hate renting because we know we're gonna need the bleachers. So I just wanted to mention that that's an outstanding item that we didn't handle. Yes, for the athletic field. Did I not make that clear? I'm sorry. I apologize. I said the stadium. Sorry. Just wanted to mention that.
That's all I have for facilities.
Mr. King, do you have anything for technology?
Nothing new to report.
Okay, liaison reports, Mr. Hill.
There are a couple things on the governor's desk, but nothing's final as to my knowledge.
Okay. MVCTC, Mrs. Donahue.
Thank you. Well, the students have been really busy this fall. There was a lot of special happenings, and I just want to call out some. And again, I'm going to apologize up front if I missed any of them, but there were a couple of standouts I just wanted to note. In the aviation maintenance technician, there were 2 of our seniors, Landon Ensley and Matt Godsey, both received their FAA airframe license, and that demonstrates that they have comprehensive understanding of aircraft structure, systems, and maintenance procedures. So that's a big deal, so congrats to them. Also, on Skills USA chapter, there's 4 chapters at the CTC, and the second chapter has to do with auto collision, auto services, auto technology, aviation maintenance, precision machining, pre-engineering, robotics and automation, and welding. And I just wanted to note that Ian Pitzer was the president of Skills Chapter 2 last year, and he is again elected to be the 23-24 president for that group. And he also was the regional Skills USA officer in 22 for the fall. And then there's one other note here. In Skills USA Chapter 4, apologize, I just want to make sure that these students get their credit. Architectural design, construction, carpentry, electrical trades, HVAC, and heavy equipment operators. That is Chapter 4. And Lillian Mihalsic is an officer in that group and studying architectural design, and that is her career field. So I just wanted to note those. And again, if I missed any going through there, I apologize. And just want to congratulate them for all their hard work. They finished school Wednesday, and then they'll start back up on January 4th, on Thursday after the holiday. Thank you.
Every ad they have for the one that has networking and cyber stuff has Austin Hopkins' face all over it. He's like the poster boy. It's awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Cool.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. Student activities, Mrs. Mansfield.
Yeah, winter sports are going well, right? And everybody's getting psyched to prepare for their auditions for Mama Mia. But other than that, everybody's just ready for breaks, like me. Done. As are the staff.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Do we have any old business tonight? Moving on, January 2024 preparation. I need a motion to confirm the organizational meeting date and time, January 8th, 2023, which I assume is a Monday at 5:30 p.m. Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. So Mrs. Mansfield, any discussion? Okay, will you call the roll, please, Mrs. Hickman?
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes.
Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Next up, we are going to appoint a board member to serve as president pro tem for the January 2024 organizational meeting. And I would like to ask Mrs. Donahue, would you be willing to serve as president pro tem?
Yes.
Thank you. So I've made a motion to appoint Mrs. Donahue as president pro tem. May I have a second? Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Any discussion? Mrs. Lyda, yeah.
Mrs. Lyda, that's
It's getting late. Mrs. Hagan, and will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue? Abstain. Okay. You can vote for yourself, but if you prefer to abstain, you're fine. Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
So it will be Mrs. Donahue.
Okay, next up is public participation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Falling down on the job. Okay, there we go.
First up, we have Mrs. Pennington.
Where should I go? Because I'm used to there being like a place to go. Over here.
Okay, so I am a concerned parent of a sophomore daughter who is slated for class in 3 weeks with a teacher that's currently under investigation at school. On Tuesday, December 5, family number 1 came into Bethel High School and had a meeting with Mr. Swope regarding a teacher's behavior toward their daughter and other classmates. Part of this family's written complaint to Mr. Swope was this: a student made a comment to their daughter saying that she had the lowest mental capacity of anyone she knows, to which this teacher replied, "Well, at least she's pretty." Teacher came up behind daughter and placed his hands on her shoulders. He then began to lightly massage them. Daughter turned around thinking it was one of her friends. When she saw that it was teacher, he patted her shoulder and walked away. Daughter shared that sometimes he takes selfies on girls' phones and she had some of hers. On Wednesday, December 6th, 2 sophomore girls were called into Swope's office to discuss a group text that they had with this teacher about things outside of school. And the parents weren't told even after the fact that their students were called in to discuss this type of situation. On Thursday, December 7th, family number 2 came into Bethel High School and had a meeting with Mr. Swope regarding this teacher. A part of their complaint is the following are occurrences that, according to my daughter, took place with teacher. Teacher on more than one occasion would massage her shoulders and while walking by, run his hand along her back. Daughter was talking to another student about feeling fat and teacher said, "That's okay, guys like to have something to grab onto."
I'm sorry, Mrs. Pennington, you have to
Notice-
address your comments to the chair of the board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Notice that this was another student for this. He told her recently that he and his wife were going to hang out that evening and then made a comment, "Hang out with my pants down." Daughter asked him for cashews that he had on his desk, and when he gave her some, he made a comment about his nuts being in her mouth. On Thursday, December 7th, family number 3 came to Bethel High School and had a meeting with Mr. Swope. This is part of their complaint. And formally making a complaint about the inappropriate behavior by teacher, as their daughter had previously reported, she had personally witnessed multiple disturbing accounts while being a student aide in his classroom. Ranking 15-year-old girls by who is the prettiest is not acceptable behavior, and making jokes about his nuts being in a child's mouth is not funny, is disgusting. She witnessed him say that to some students. These are accounts which my daughter witnessed herself. On Friday, December 8th, teacher was still in the classroom, so discovering this, myself and 3 other parents sat down with Mr. Swope and Mr. Crispin, and after a long conversation, that teacher was put on suspension until you guys can take a look and make a decision. It is important to note that 2 families have filed police reports with Miami County Sheriff's Department. The Bethel Board of Education sexual harassment policy contains this language. Prohibited acts that constitute sexual harassment under this policy may take a variety of forms. Examples of the kind of conduct that may constitute sexual harassment include but are not limited to unwelcome sexual propositions, invitations, solicitations, and flirtations, unwanted physical or sexual contact, unwanted verbal expressions of sexual nature, including sexual commentaries about sexual activities, the unwelcome use of sexually degrading language, profanity, jokes, or innuendos, unwelcome and inappropriate touching, patting, or pinching, asking about or telling about sexual activities, remarks about one's own sexual activities or sexual history, a pattern of conduct which can be subtle in nature, but has sexual overtones and is intended to create or has the effect of creating discomfort and or humiliation. Inappropriate boundary invasions by a district employee or another adult member of the school district community into a student's personal space and personal life. So as you read the sexual harassment policy that the board has, please note how many of these items apply to our current situation. Also note that most of the items in these complaints are corroborated by other students It's not an isolated incident, but a pattern of behavior that has been witnessed by multiple students. A grown man that makes sexual comments to students is at the very least guilty of conduct unbecoming a professional. And the Board of Education has the right and responsibility to terminate his contract. We request that the board terminate the contract and file a report with the Ohio Department of Education for conduct unbecoming a teacher. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Herndon. Next up, Trish Rogers. Is it Mrs. Rogers, Ms. Rogers? I apologize. Mrs., thank you.
First, I'd like to say congratulations to the teachers. We've been in this district for 7 years now. I still have 2 kids in the high school, and we have had phenomenal teachers. I thank each and every one of you. What I'd like to speak to you about is substitute teachers. Currently, the situation that's going on at the high school has caused a substitute teacher to be in the classroom, and this substitute teacher is basically completely ineffective. And this is a core class that students need, and there is no activity being done in this core class. And we have exams coming up this week for these students. And students are basically being allowed to leave the classroom, go hang out in the gym, go do other activities instead of actually having academics being taught. The other teacher for this subject is attempting to help the students as they can. They're providing study guides, but the students are basically on their own to learn the topics and prepare for their exam. So I come to you with that concern to kind of try to do what we can to possibly get better substitute teachers for our students, especially in these core classes that they need to progress into the next subject. Because this isn't an art class where they can lack teaching for a couple of weeks. This is a core class that teaching is progressive. So I would appreciate some, if you could look into that and just make sure that our students are getting that fundamental right to education that all these phenomenal teachers we have here at Beth will take care of for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rogers. It's not typical for the board to respond, but I do want to mention that we have a sub shortage. That's not a new problem, but I did want to mention that. Yes, sir. Mrs. Reese.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mrs. Reese.
So first, I'd just like to thank Natalie for asking public stakeholder input on the agenda. Most board members are elected to represent the views and voices of the community. We are a public school where business is required to be done in public for the Ohio Sunshine Law. What better way to hear what everyone's thinking than in forum? So having said that, I had some agenda comments, which may not apply anymore, but I just wanted to ask a couple things about. There's a chart for employee turnover. How about one for new position hires? Another question is, can you include in the enrollment numbers preschool and the young fives? And how many of the high school students are off campus that are in that enrollment chart? We used to track that. We'll just need to see. I'm very happy for the teachers. It's definitely a step in the right direction. Just want to let you know the public could not see the recommended classified or admin salary schedules, so I don't know what they look like. However, my question is, why hide them? Why couldn't you see them? I see 4 more administrative positions are proposed, or at least some are job descriptions, which means they'll be proposed in the future. One's already filled. The filled position had an attached job description that looked like many of the duties listed had been removed from the maintenance director or the assistant maintenance director and made into another full-time administrative position. I just am worried that we're ballooning our administrative staff under the "we are growing" line, as it seems we have been doing for the last 5 years or so. We probably doubled our administrative positions in the last 2 to 3 years. And many of these have not been in the 5-year plan. On the income tax levy, I feel it should not be continuing. This allows current voters to speak for the township in perpetuity. It takes away the rights of future voters to have a say. I'm sure you've heard the saying, no taxation without representation. The board used to tell the public we needed the levies because we were capped and got shorted about $2.5 million each year. That could be a case where we do need levy monies. But if the state continues to fully fund us, we should not need this levy in the future, and it should be evaluated along the way, which should not be continuous. As always, I'm not discussing individuals, but also in the agenda, there were some onboard instructors listed, but there's no duties listed with them, there's no effective dates. It used to be that the board approved part-time salaries based on the duties of the position. It doesn't seem appropriate to just hire individuals into a generic position like that. In the agenda, the classified substitutes did not have salary lists or effective dates. I don't believe that an increase of 15% for a single year is ever reasonable. We need to stop doing this. I would suggest raising it over a 3-year period or something instead. So it hits the budget. I really did not understand the need to hurry up and push through many of the items that were in this agenda that are really next year's task. We can move on the farm contract. Definitely needs to be before March because the farmer then can plan and buy their inputs and stuff. Oh, yes. I still believe we need to have work sessions so the items can be fully discussed in public. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Reese. Mrs. Hughes.
I want to thank you, Natalie, for asking trusted Brian, that's what I believe in. Number two, I want to have a decision to say yes or no, in any levies, income levies or whatever. I will not be paying this income levy for this. I don't work, I'm retired. But I want the ability to say no. And I would be voting no on this levy in March.
Thank you, Mrs. Hughes.
You're welcome.
We had one that came in after the meeting started. Is that something we'd have to allow participation?
I think we've done it in the past.
Yeah.
It's been like a standing.
Okay, Mrs. Kippelberg.
I'm gonna decline my time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kippelberg. Is there a need for executive session this evening? I'd like to read a few comments before we adjourn. It's been an honor and privilege to serve the Bethel Local School District for the past 8 years. I'd like to thank my colleagues on the school board, the administration, and all the staff for their work. We survived COVID, unprecedented growth in multiple building projects. In my time on the board, we built 3 new facilities, the high school addition, the elementary school, and the athletic stadium. To our knowledge, we are the only public school district in Ohio to build an elementary school and stadium of that magnitude, approximately $34 million, funded without going back to voters for additional tax money. I'm proud of the opportunities we have created for all students to excel and succeed. I wish all the new board members all the best moving forward. Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Hold on there. Okay, you'll get the last word because you get, actually you will.
Wait, I was
Yes.
just gonna say, if you're gonna get the last word, I just want to say personally, thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Lida, and thank you, Lori, for your time in the district, on the school board. Your time and energy and your commitment has been appreciated, and I just want to personally thank you all.
So I'll springboard off those sentiments. It's with great gratitude and admiration that we extend our congratulations to outgoing board members Jacob King, Lyda Mansfield, and Lori Sebastian for their exceptional service to Bethel Local Schools. In recognition of their outstanding contributions, we are delighted to present Jacob, Lyda, and Lori with varsity letter blankets of our appreciation. These blankets symbolize the warmth of our gratitude and the lasting impact they have made on this district. As they transition from their roles as board members, we want to express our deepest thanks and for your service and wish you continued success in all that you do, and don't be strangers. Congratulations and thank you.
This is lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, it's got our names.
It does. It's lovely.
And the number of years served. It's beautiful. Nicely spelled. And you have my name right. I spelled it wrong. I got it. Every 4 years. Anything else before I make a motion to adjourn? I apologize. I couldn't get it.
Speedy.
Yeah, Speedy Gonzalez, do you want to say?
I would just like to say thank you to the staff. I know Tracy specifically and Miss Henry, both of you have had such a lasting impact on my children's lives that are well graduated and still speak with you. So to this day, all good things, of course, right? But as also, right, my two that are still in middle school that are coming through, right, all have had a lasting impact, not only by you, but for all the teachers that are here. So I will continue to be a part of the school system for at least 6 more years with them, and just want to thank my family. I'd like to thank my wife for supporting me and supporting us as we try to move the school in the right direction to support our growth and educational responsibilities for our students. So thank you.
And I also would like to thank everyone, especially the educators here. My son has had a wonderful time at Bethel and now at the CTC, and all of the teachers here that he's had. I've seen Mr. Campbell back there for all of his time in math club, decathlon, and all that. He's had so many wonderful teachers here, and Mr. Denlinger, I had you twice. Right? So I don't know who reads your, scripts now when you guys are reading out loud in class, but I'm sure it can. Just saying. It's been a wonderful experience here for even being on the board. Obviously, there've been some trying times, but I've learned a lot about myself. I've developed a lot of different character traits that I didn't know I was going to develop coming into this, but I've met some great peers and some great educators, and had some wonderful, wonderful times that have just grown me as a person. It's been fabulous. And I actually just recently learned that through the dark times of, what we might consider the dark times, or the, most antagonistic times of the board, there was actually an attendee at one of the very first big antagonistic meetings who saw that there was a lot of anger towards people at each other. And he turned that into a campaign for billboards about love towards each other. He has had over 1,700 billboards across the country in all 50 states about love and kindness, and it has been displayed. There have been over 1.75 million flashes of those electronic billboards across the country that were inspired by us. For better or for worse, we have encouraged messages of love around the country. And so I take that as a very heartening message. For whatever the reason might have been behind it, the reality is that messages of love are being spread because of Bethel. And I take that as a good thing. That's my first message.
And this past year, I would just like to thank everybody. One thing I stressed when I became president was chain of command, and I would really just like to thank those of you here for following that. It really does make a difference. I know when I was a new board member, I had lots of chain of command violations, but figured it out. So I'd encourage the community and the new board members to follow that chain of command, and life will be much easier. So if anyone else want to say anything?
I would say one last parting shot,
yeah.
please, is to the new board members. Welcome to the hardest job on the planet.
For real, I bet.
So I've worked at a lot of places, done a lot of hard stuff, but mentally, this is going to be the hardest job that I've ever done. And that is the fact that no matter what you decide, based on just trying to do what's best for the school district, that it'll be wrong to parents, community, teachers, or students. There's never been one thing that we've done that has made everybody happy.
That's right. No matter how much research,
No matter what you do,
no matter how many
there's
people you talk to.
always one or two that are the opposite. So it's tough. We've lost friends,
Oh, yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely.
For that, for some of those decisions,
Absolutely.
understandably. So just be prepared.
And can I thank your wife too?
Oh, sure. She's
She
laying in the
has been
hospital
great.
bed right now,
Oh,
so she's admitted to something.
Oh, my God.
So with a serious illness.
Motion to adjourn.
Seriously.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. King. Second. Second by Mrs. Mansfield. Mrs. Hagan, will you call the roll, please?
Okay, Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
Mr. King,
Abstain.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Yeah.
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue.
Yes. Meeting adjourned at 8:59. We almost made 2 hours. Thank you, everyone.
We had a company.
So. Yes.
Like she likes.